The information shared on this podcast is for informational and educational purposes only and is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. While we discuss topics related to mental health, well-being, and emotional support, we are not providing therapy or medical services. Always seek the advice of your physician, psychologist, psychiatrist, or other qualified mental health provider with any questions you may have regarding a mental health condition. If you are in crisis, feeling unsafe, or need immediate support, please contact a mental health professional or emergency services in your area. The views expressed by guests and hosts are their own and do not necessarily reflect those of any affiliated organizations or institutions.
Get inspired, get motivated with M.A.Y.A and the M.A.Y.A, My Ambition, Your Ambition podcast.
Something that I take pride in is trying to be forward thinking, thinking outside the box, challenging myself. And as I challenge myself, hopefully I challenge you.
Find M.A.Y.A on Twitter and Instagram at M.A.Y.A_Akai. On Facebook at M.A.Y.A Akai Presents.
We're going to talk health, wealth, fitness, mental health, financial, lots of different things that can empower you as you seek out the ambition that you're pursuing.
Or get everything M.A.Y.A at M.A.Y.A_Akai.com.
Namaste, everyone. Welcome to episode 75 of M.A.Y.A, My Ambition, Your Ambition. And we are talking youth empowerment, something that is always worthy of a lot of conversation, with our guest today, Shawna Rosenzweig, who is the president and CEO of Campfire. And many of you probably do not know what Campfire is, but you will know by the end of the show for sure. So as you know, we dive into the show. We like to take really salient topics and bring it to the table, especially when we're talking about mental wellness, because we know it's not exactly the sexiest conversation that people like to have, but we still need to have it. And especially when we talk about our youth, this conversation legitimately is going to be top of the list. So if you are a first-time listener or viewer, welcome. I usually will say, like, buckle up for safety, because occasionally it can get unexpectedly, like, maybe bumpy, because we may say something that might, bring up a memory or make you think about something. And that's a good thing, because here we want you to start thinking about things, because that's how change happens. And of course, if you are a returning listener or viewer, well, of course, always welcome back. You're more than familiar with how we do things here. I always say, find that space, because you've carved out at least, 30 minutes to an hour of your time to listen or watch the podcast. So find that spot that works for you. I always encourage people to grab maybe like some paper, a pen and pencil, because you can jot something down, some information, because we're always sharing something that's definitely a worthy thing to check out. So you can jot down your information. And of course, I say, grab your beverage of choice, grab some tea, coffee somewhere. So go ahead, whatever, grab your drink of choice and sit down and listen to episode 75. This is actually our 8th installment of the Ambition Show. And as you know, we have had some amazing guests that have been on the show. So if you've missed any of the episodes, don't panic. You can always find them, the podcast, on iTunes, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Amazon Audible, Spotify. Pretty much if it's a podcast platform, you can find M.A.Y.A, My Ambition, Your Ambition there. Of course, the really easy thing to do is just subscribe and share my YouTube channel at M.A.Y.A Speaks to You. And you'll always be notified when an episode is coming up. And, I finally got it together, because all of my social media is at M.A.Y.A Speaks to You via Facebook, IG, and X. I can't keep up with all these different platforms, but I finally got my handle to be the same. But of course, something that's really easy to do is just go to my website, M.A.Y.A-speaks.com, for all things M.A.Y.A. I have 2 things there that I really love. My inspirational blog, which I only do once a week. I post it on Wednesdays. It's something that I really want you to process and think about. And I'm not going to throw something at you daily, because I feel like the thought I give you is worth really kind of processing throughout the week. And of course, anybody who knows me knows that the topic of menopause is near and dear to me, because I am the poster child for menopause. And so I have my menopause blog, Me on Pause, and I pick a topic that, to be honest, most women are not informed about. If you are going through perimenopause or menopause, you can get some really useful information there. So that's always how you can, watch, listen, find the show, anything that is Maya. We launched the Ambition shows in the month of August. And I did this because I wanted to create shows that would be dedicated to introducing you to people that I feel like you should know, because they are the embodiment of when passion and purpose intersect with ambition. And every guest I've had has been nothing short of amazing. If you remember, if you checked out episode 74, we had Dr. M.A.Y.A Simmons on. She is a fertility expert. She has a podcast called Egg Meet Sperm. It's worth checking out. You can find it on Spotify as well as on Apple Podcast. She also has a book that she has written. I'm going to say this: if you're struggling with fertility, but I also say she's a big advocate for women's health. So it's more than just about fertility. So if you're struggling with, let's say, PCOS, endometriosis, things like that, she's a person that you really want to follow, because she is a wealth of information. But without further ado, we're stepping into our 8th guest. I'm so excited to meet you and have her put her on screen, Shawna Rosenzweig. So pretty much, here's what you need to know about Shawna. 1, and I like to really give people like the big walk on stage. She is a national leader when you talk about youth development. She has dedicated her career, which you can also say pretty much a good portion of her life, to empowering children in school time organizations. And she focuses on advocacy that looks at equity, inclusion, and equality. Words that cannot in today's world really be thrown around lightly, especially when we talk about kids. Her work has brought lots of diverse communities together, and she works for Campfire, and they're known for creating those environments where everyone feels truly seen and heard. So without further ado, let's bring on our 8th guest to the Ambition stage, Shawna Rosenzweig.
Hi, Maya. Thanks for having me today.
Always, yes. Talking about kids for me, Shawna, is something that legitimately is near and dear to my heart. And I feel, especially in the current climate that we have, we really need to, I feel, when they say it takes a village to raise a child, I really feel in today's climate, that's where we're at. So first, before we jump into talking about Campfire, which I know everyone's going to be excited to hear about, and they're going to be praying and hoping that it's somewhere in their community for sure. But tell us first, who is Shawna? What's your background? What got you to what is now, I feel like, clearly your passion and your purpose?
Yeah, no, it's for me, it goes back to when I was a young person myself, right? So I, was fortunate to have a number of teachers and other adults in my life that I looked up to, right? And I used to, there were 2 people I wanted to be. One was either my kindergarten teacher or one of our local news anchors here in Seattle. Jean Anderson was like one of the first, female like primetime anchors. And I was like, look at her. I like that. And so, spoiler alert, obviously I didn't go into journalism and media. And so I grew up thinking, hey, I want to work with kids. How do I do that? I become a teacher, and was on that path really through college. And just by happenstance, I was procrastinating writing a paper in college and was like, I better get some extra credit because this paper's not going to be so hot. And it was to go watch this documentary about a summer camp in Maine that takes high school students from different regions in conflict around the world and brings them to 3 weeks of summer camp. And not only are they experiencing, all the fun things of summer camp of, water activities and sports and competitions and, whatever you do with your bunk, all the different things, right? And they also were doing really intense conflict resolution, right? And we're seeing themselves and, their so-called enemies in really different light. And I was completely fascinated by this, right? Like 90 minutes later, I was like, what is this? I have to find out more. And long story short, I ended up spending that summer and the next summer as a camp counselor there, and then got to spend some time in the Middle East working with them in between. And that really set me on my trajectory of really the power of out of school time spaces and the possibility for how they can shift young people's perceptions of themselves and others. And, here I am 20 plus years later, very fortunate to lead one of the oldest, youth serving youth development organizations in Campfire. And so, yeah, as you mentioned, some folks, have never heard of us. Some folks don't realize they actually have heard of us or are an alumni themselves. So we were founded 115 years ago, really to give young women the opportunity to get outside in ways that young men were afforded the opportunity, but girls weren't. And so we were founded as Campfire Girls, and that was our name through the 1970s, and today are known for Campfire. And we include young people of all genders. So that's a little bit about, my journey and how I ended up in the youth development field.
Wow, 115 years. That's a long time for an organization to be around. I totally love the reason it was created, to create those spaces for girls to have the opportunity to do things that their, male counterparts were doing. So I love it that space was created. Was it initially originally in Seattle where this started?
So it actually started in Maine, and ironically, on the same lake or a neighboring lake that Seeds of Peace, the program I was talking about, where I kind of had my first summer camp exposure. The original Campfire Camp was not far from it. Again, just 100 years prior. So both had their starts in Maine, ironically. So.
Okay. So kind of tell us, because when I started, again, for me, it was something that I had never heard of. And then when I did the research to find that literally there was like one in my backyard, I was like, wow, there's one right there, like less than maybe 30 minutes for me. And I had never heard of it. So I'm like, one, I think this is wonderful. I'm learning about something that I can support that's locally connected to me. But then I love the fact that this is one of those shows where you guys are pretty much, you got locations around the country, which means it's also something that, individuals could benefit in other states. So kind of what does it, obviously Campfire has grown beyond the idea of just, the great outdoors and providing all these opportunities for young women. So kind of, I saw that it looks like it's broken into like some different parts where there's like a teen part, there's the out of school time and some other things. Kind of tell us how Campfire is set up.
Yeah. So we know young people experience their lives holistically, right? So they might go from, school to an after school program, or, during the summer, they may go to a day camp or an overnight camp, or, there's all kinds of different ways that young people are moving through their days and their weeks and their months and their lives, right? And so what's important for Campfire is that we're showing up for young people in all the spaces that they're in. So you can find Campfire in a lot of different settings. Right, true to our roots, right? We have overnight programs that take place primarily during the summer. A lot of our summer camp properties are actually used for school groups during the school year. So your 4th or 5th or 6th grade class might have the opportunity, again, for young people who may not otherwise have the opportunity to get outside and experience an overnight summer camp activity. They get to go with their school or their school district to a multi-night camp experience during the school year. We also have day camps that take place within their communities, and then a number of after-school programs, again, that will happen either before and or after school. Many of those take place in school buildings themselves. And then others are in more community-based settings, whether it's a local park, a Campfire office or community space, et cetera. And then as part of that, as young people get older, we have a wide array of leadership programs where young people not only are able to develop, what we call the adulting skills, right? The life skills that they are telling us that they want and need, but then they also are having the opportunity to gain some work experience as well, right? As a leader in training or a day camp aide or a counselor in training. So really amazing experiences where young people, our teens, are both growing and, as participants, but also as leaders.
Very, very nice. I mean, I love those. I love how, especially there's that piece for teens, like who maybe probably themselves have come through the program and then they get to step into that leadership role. But the thing that I really like hearing is so many of the things that you're talking about, you're offering, to me, extends beyond realistically the capacity of what a school can honestly do for their students. They can't do and be everything. And I like that this becomes an opportunity. And I like, opposed to saying after school, it's out of school. I like that, a different approach to it. So, like, for instance, I noticed like there's an investment in STEM. So say someone's like, I love this idea, but I've looked at the locations online and I don't see that it exists. How does Campfire get brought into be like, say, for instance, an out of school program?
Love this question because I love partnerships for the exact reason you're naming, right? Like no one school, no one organization can do it all, and nor should they, right? We have an amazing ecosystem of organizations and individuals that are supporting young people, and we should keep growing that. And so, yeah, if there's not a campfire in your community, reach out to us at the national office, at campfire.org, and we're happy to explore partnerships. So we've worked with organizations where we provide training and technical assistance to support their staff in how to work with young people in a positive youth development way. We've worked with other organizations where we help them develop inclusive practices and policies so that all young people feel welcome in their programs. And we've worked with schools, again, who want to bring a bit of that out of school time, maybe that kind of summer camp magic to their school days. We work with them to figure out ways to do that, right? And to incorporate, whether it's some program content or some different ways of engaging with young people into their program. So there's a number of different ways that folks can get involved, and we're always happy to explore and collaborate.
Wonderful. And I was thinking that because I see that you have a program that invests in STEM, I'm like, oh, this sounds like a great partnership opportunity with organizations or companies to kind of provide that, type of experience. And the reason for me that I loved it, because something that I learned in working with some of my clients I have in therapy that happened, I have an interesting group where I was having them in therapy in high school, and they've now matriculated through college. And I was like, what, you're a senior? I'm like, we've been talking this long? But so it's kind of funny that I've watched them grow in front of my eyes. But the thing that it's interesting that one of my clients mentioned is that she is in the tech field. She's an aerospace major, which we know is definitely very competitive. I always applaud her for all the work that she has done. And one of the things that she shared when she was applying for different programs, because it's very competitive to get into those programs, was that she had learned that there were actually programs that existed for individuals where they would have counselors outside of high school. And those counselors worked with them to actually put them in what I would say would be internships that would be related to their field of study as much as it could be. And of course, this became something that was definitely like a feather in their cap when it came time to apply for these programs, that they actually had what you could say was some loose in-field experience. So I'm seeing Campfire, I'm like, wow, one, it's a great way to expose kids to STEM, but then also they don't even realize they're building their resumes that they don't even know exists. Because I feel like Campfire is a great, when you write that personal development statement that may make every kid write for college. But I was like, wow, I feel like any kid who goes through Campfire has these amazing experiences to speak to.
Yeah, no, what I love about what you're saying, and I think is so true, is that, programs like Campfire provide a very different space to be exploring something like STEM related topics in, right? And it's, I think about the young person, that is for all kinds of, kind of societally ingrained messages of science isn't for me or math isn't for me because of, fill in the blank, my gender or another identity that I hold, right? That oftentimes when they are kind of first exposed to, STEM activities or STEM programs in a program like Campfire, they don't even realize that's what it is, right? Because you're having fun, you're working, in community with others. You're almost more focused on the connections that you're building, right? Like the connections to new interests and passions and the connections to others. And then all of a sudden you're like, wait, what? That was STEM and I'm interested in that, and then, right, it leads to oh, hey, I think I might've just found my spark, right? Which is the passion, that purpose that you're talking about. And then, right, exactly. That's where we train our staff to be okay, hey, if you recognize that spark in a young person, how do we support that? And, and really encourage that to blossom in each young person, right? And it may change over time. And, some young people, when they find it, they're like, yes, I am going into aerospace, right? For other young people, it's oh my gosh, and then there's this, and then there's that, and whatever. And that exploration is just as valuable, but absolutely. And part of what we try to do within all our programs is, the activities, the engagements, that's all amazing and super fun and so intentionally designed. But there's always a period for reflection as well, both kind of self-reflection and group reflection, because that's where I think they get that piece that you were talking about, right? That ability to say, hey, like, what is this and how does this fit into like my bigger picture, right? Whether it's what I want to do in the future, like, hey, can I talk about this as part of that, that's that personal reflection essay? Or is it, hey, could this be a career path for me? Or hey, how do I, did I just find someone who can help champion this for me? And, we took a community-based trip, right, to a local company that does something similar. And now I want to be in the role that that person's in, right? So that reflection piece is so crucial, I think, to helping young people kind of gain that awareness and perspective and the language to say, hey, yeah, that's me. I see myself in this, which is a really magical moment.
It is, especially considering that for some reason we feel that 18 is like a magical number and that we're going to send everybody to college and you have exactly an idea of how you want to spend the rest of your life in a job. I always laugh at that. I'm like, that is the most impractical thing that we think anybody at 18, especially if you've never experienced it. So that's what I like about that's the immersive side of what you're giving them to really get a feel for it and to research and to kind of go back to it. I think that part's very powerful. So what age group do you start with Campfire? Does it start like in like grade school, junior high? What's the age it starts?
Yeah, no, great question. So the vast majority of our participants start in elementary school, right? So we serve, kindergarten through 12th grade. In a few select locations, we have early childhood programs. So young people are able to even kind of start their Campfire journey a little younger, and part of kind of my own leadership journey, through the organization. So I've been fortunate to be at Campfire for 12 plus years. I've been in the CEO role since January of this year. So coming on 10 months here, is really recognizing too, as you're talking about that period from like 18 to 24, 25, right? Where you really are still figuring it all out. And for so many of the young people that work in our programs, right? Whether they are a program alum or, similar to my experience, they're having their first, out of school time experience, especially if it's at an overnight summer camp as a camp counselor, right? And as you're entering the workforce in your own journey, thinking about kind of the role that Campfire plays in supporting our emerging professionals and our young professionals is another kind of role and responsibility that both I personally take a lot of both pride and responsibility in, but also organizationally, we're focusing a lot more time and attention. And what you named is really what we're hearing from our emerging professionals is like, help us think about, like, help us name, how does this fit into my bigger journey? How can this create kind of multiple pathways for me to pursue? Because, exactly, like at 18, did I know exactly what I wanted to do? No, of course not. And in some ways, I'm glad I didn't, right? Like, I'm glad this whole idea of, well, I'm sure I would have had a good time being a teacher. Like, no, like this is my passion and my purpose. And I wouldn't have found that otherwise, right? And so having the opportunity to try different things and work in different settings and with different people is such a crucial part of that late adolescent development that I think oftentimes, right, is kind of forgotten about. It's like, cool, go to, you're 18, you're an adult now, do your thing, whether it's college or another path,
right?
and you're on your way, right? And so really having kind of the supportive environment, the relationships, right? Like that person to confide in, as you named, is I think a crucial part of that stage of life development as well.
It is. It's such a delicate time. And the other thing about Campfire that I really like is that when you talk about the idea of equity, equality, and inclusion, I know people think those words become too trendy and they're tossed around too much. But I don't think people really realize what it means to, especially children, young adults, and feeling that they have those things. And I feel like when a kid walks through the Campfire doors, like, because one of the things I'll hear a lot in some of the kids I have in therapy, I started 13 and up, I will hear like they struggle to make friends. They don't have good self-confidence. They don't have a belief in their ability that they, can, be a good student. And I find this is that space outside of school that literally can provide a lot of those soft skills, which are more hard skills than we realize, that kids honestly are really struggling to develop in a school, like a classroom setting.
Yeah. And I think what you're naming is that, like, growing up isn't political, right? We know growing up is hard, and the challenges that young people face can be different with every generation, right? And so, I was actually just talking to my own kids about this the other day, right? They were like, when you grew up, like, did you have cell phones? I was like, no, not until much later. Did you have the internet? No, and for them to be able to name like, yeah, like cell phone addiction, social media, right? All of the pieces that they're dealing with, right? Wasn't what made growing up hard for me, but it's what's making growing up hard for them. And there were other challenges, right, that made it hard for us. And every generation has kind of their things of what makes growing up hard. And so for Campfire, we really try to anchor all our work and like, we know growing up is hard. Right. So right now for young people, it's things like bullying, social media, we hear a lot about like the loneliness epidemic, right?
Yes.
Identities being targeted, all of these things. And so instead it's saying, okay, we know growing up is hard. How can we use kind of 3 forms of connection? And that's connection to the outdoors, right? We know the research tells us, right, that being outside and in nature is, not only great for your physical health, it's great for your mental health and well-being as well. How can we use connection to others, right? Building those pro-social relationships, right? Getting offline and in real life with folks, right? And then connection to self, right? Like the self-confidence, the sense of purpose, the passion, right? All of those pieces, the perseverance skills, really connecting to who you are and who you want to become and feeling good about that. And that's the kind of how we lift up young people with kind of the resiliency skills, the skills that really help them to navigate whatever the challenges are that they may face while growing up. When I think about our approach to, inclusion and building belonging in our programs, the example I love to use is curb cuts, right? So we've all stepped off a curb, right, where a curb cut has been built in, right? So that someone who is using, a mobility device, a wheelchair, whether it's short-term or long-term, is able to safely, get off the curb and cross the street, right? So while that was put in for, a specific user in mind, in this case, right, for folks who are using wheelchairs, it also benefits everyone, right? And so I think about the person pulling their grocery cart, right? Like as you're like dragging groceries. I lived in New York City for a while, so that was a real thing, right? The parent pushing a stroller, right? Trying to get a stroller with a sleeping baby off a curb is always a disaster, right? So, even I got a very old dog who was blind and will fall off a curb if I don't take her across a curb cut, right? There's a million other ways that we are all benefiting, even if we are not the ones who use wheelchairs, that we still benefit from curb cuts. And so a lot of how we design for belonging in our programs is really looking for those curb cuts, right? And so I think about many of our program spaces now have calm corners, right? And that's a space where young people can decompress, can kind of, re-regulate their nervous system, and there's comfy pillows, there's fidget toys, there's sensory objects, right? There's all kinds of things that we know from, research and practice that help young people to kind of re-regulate their systems, to kind of get back to baseline. And while those were initially designed because we heard from our neurodynamic and neurodivergent young people that, hey, this is a meaningful space for me. This helps me to feel that I am included and, I am welcomed in this space. We find everyone's benefiting from them, right? Like I love a good fidget toy too, right? That helps me when I'm feeling anxious. And so again, there's a number of examples, that just being one of them, where really everyone's benefiting, that it's not just for one group by one group, but again, it's really designed with saying, hey, who might have been told historically that they aren't welcome in this space, whether it's subconsciously or consciously, and how can we make it a more welcoming space for them, and in turn, create that curb cut effect so that everyone in this space is benefiting.
I like that. That is actually a really good example how something may have a purpose for one particular group, but yet everyone can benefit from it in some capacity. And working with young people, I will say that they are far more intuitive and observe things more than most adults believe that they do. They see a lot. They just may choose not to either address it because sometimes they don't know how to address things. It sounds like whether it's like an out of school or especially the summer camps, it sounds like it also creates that space for the participants to have a voice and to maybe share things and ask tough questions that maybe, because if you're a kid right now watching what's happening in the world, I don't know that you know how to even understand what you see unfolding in front of you. And I feel like going to campfire would allow a kid a safe space to ask questions and to learn more about the things they may be curious about that they don't understand.
100%. So my favorite example of this, because campfire is exactly what you're naming, right? Is a space where young people really have the voice to shape the organization, right? We often talk about they have both the voice and the choice, right? Of like how they participate and in shaping the organization and their programs. And so, the kind of real world example that young people asked for that, has been a major focus of my work for 5+ years, because again, young people said, hey, this is what we want, right? So the camping industry as a whole has a number of examples, while maybe well-intentioned at the time, dating back again 100 years or more, where we have culturally appropriated indigenous peoples, right? Whether it's their cultures, their practices, etc. And so, we had a group of young people who are at one of our camps that said, oh, these cabin names, even though I'm, a non-native young person myself, like these cabin names are made to sound native, are made to sound indigenous. And that doesn't tell me that, a native young person would be welcome, or that I'm welcome, with any of the identities I hold. And so that, was one of the factors that really, created a strategic priority for the organization to address and end cultural appropriation within our organization and within our programs. And today, I'm incredibly proud to say, we have, made tremendous changes in that area and are really now moving into the repairing harm work and building the relationships, the partnerships, with Native communities to support Native youth, again, as part of the reparation effort, to saying, hey, we did cause harm, right? And young people helped us to both recognize, name, and make those changes. And so, one of the ways that it came through was, young people earn emblems in our programs as a way of self-reflection. So it's a way to, to document their accomplishments, to recognize their achievements within the organization. And historically, they had a lot of symbols that, again, had either factually correct roots or sometimes made up to look Indian. And, so what we did, right, as part of this effort was we had a group of young people, these were teenagers, work with a professional graphic designer that we hired and said, hey, let's make a new emblem system, completely redesign this in a way that, one, is not culturally appropriative, that makes, everyone feel welcome and like they belong. And also, what else do you want out of this, right? And so one of the things they said was like, hey, we want to know what it was we earned it for. Like, if it's a random symbol, I'm not going to remember what that is 2 years from now. So like, and they had very strong feelings on colors and design and all that, but great, it's what they wanted, right? And they were like, hey, actually, instead of patches, let's do stickers, because then we can throw them on our water bottles and our laptops and whatever, and have that, kind of consistent reminder of what I've accomplished. And so that's just one example of, youth voice is something we take very seriously within Campfire. And to your point, yes, young people are very aware and often, and are willing to really take the lead on some things, and they want our support, right? Yep. They know that, generationally, we've left them a few messes that they're going to have to deal with, right? Like climate change and the environment. And to leave that burden fully on them also is not the nicest thing that we can do, right, as adults. And, one of the things that I think about is like, how do we support them now? How do we show up, for them, with them, alongside them?
Yes.
To support them as they are really going to be, right, the stewards of what's to come, right? And the changes that we'll see both within our lifetimes and beyond. So that's a key way we help young people develop their voice.
I love it's the voice and the choice. Because something, I love that you are instilling that in them now. You got some adults that need to figure that out. So I love the idea that you're already empowering them to understand the power of your voice, what you do with it. So love that's happening. So say you have a person who, okay, like their kids are all adults, they're gone, you know, they're like, oh, this is a great idea. I wish I would have known about this when, you know, I had my kids and I was looking for something to get them involved in. How can a person get involved with Campfire, you know, and the programming, or how can someone just get involved if they really want to be invested in this?
It's never too late to get involved is the short answer. So, and there's many different ways, right? So, you know, as a nonprofit organization, you know, we always need, you know, it takes a village, right? Same as what you named before. And so, you know, we are always looking for volunteers. So we often will have, you know, volunteers that work directly with young people. In other situations we have, if you're like, nah, maybe not my thing, I love the idea, but like, I'm not about to go hang out with a young person. We have, you know, camp cleanup days or community engagement days, and those are great ways. So oftentimes we'll have, you know, a whole company come out and help prepare a summer camp for the summer, or do some, you know, nature cleanup or site improvements. So there's a number of different ways. There's also, you know, if you are able to give, you know, with your wallet, you know, we always talk about time, talent, or treasure. You know, donations make a huge difference and help us keep, you know, both the costs of programs low and, you know, eliminate some of the gaps that can exist. You know, we try to make sure that cost is never a barrier, equipment is never a barrier, you know, any of those pieces. And so donations always help to close that. You know, serving as a board member as well, right? We look for both, there's local board opportunities and national board opportunities as well. So a number of different ways to get involved. And again, our website is a great place to start. And reach out to us, and we're happy to work with you to find the right sized opportunity to kind of match to your time, talent, or treasure.
I love that. Time, talent, or treasure. That's great. I love that. One of the things I noticed as I was like reading through the website, and you've mentioned it a couple times, but I think it is so important. You've mentioned family. It isn't so much you've talked only about, hey, we do this for the kids. I feel like the idea and the purpose of family is front and center in what Campfire does.
Absolutely. And, you know, again, young people don't exist in a vacuum, right? Their lives are not in a vacuum. They're engaging with people all throughout their days, right? Whether it's at home, at school. And so, yeah, we do a lot of work to really support the caregivers as well, that, you know, those who are in young people's lives. And so, and we also recognize that some of our programs, especially the overnight ones, you know, culturally folks may not be either familiar or comfortable with the idea of like, hey, I'm just going to send my kid off, you know, for this, you know, week-long experience when I have never experienced that, right? And I don't know if it's safe, if it's, you know, something my kid's going to enjoy, all of the different feelings, right, that we have as parents. And so, yeah, we do everything from family camps, which are some of my favorite ways to kind of get familiar with our programs. And that's another way. Again, even if there's not a campfire in your area, there may be an opportunity where you're like, hey, this is just a short road trip away to go spend a weekend, you know, and oftentimes they're themes. So in some cases we will have like a Proud to Be Me program, right, for LGBTQ plus young people and their families. Or in other cases, it's a Minecraft themed weekend, right? So we see all kinds of different family camps. Again, based off of interests and identities that folks can choose from, to have a really, again, kind of to meet other families, other caregivers, other young people, to get to know Campfire programs as well. And that's a great entry point. But yes, we really try to think about, again, it's building that web of support for young people. And it's not just going to be the folks that are, you know, working or volunteering in our programs. It's also, again, kind of how do we lift all boats and support the caregivers in their lives as well, to really help young people on their own journey.
And that's the piece in the puzzle I think is often missing in a lot of organizations, is not finding a place to insert the parents or the family beyond the idea of, hey, we're paying for this. Okay, yeah, but how about you give me, because I think this also turns into an opportunity to maybe even learn more about their child, learn maybe some things they didn't know, see them in another light, and even probably find out from a parenting standpoint how to be more supportive. So I even feel like even though the parents are coming there to be involved, I think what they can walk away with can also be very empowering for their child.
So true. And you're reminding me of kind of a practice we actually introduced a few years ago, which was, yes, there's a typical registration form that, folks fill out to send the young people in their lives to our programs. And we realized, what you were naming, right? That oftentimes what gets filled out in a form, and I'm guilty of this too as a parent, like I'm just like, oh my gosh, there's another, page. How long is this going to take? Like, I just want to be done signing my kid up for day camp or after school or whatever it is. But you're missing so much to really understand this young person, right? And their needs and their desires and, and the family, and how do you build that relationship? And we found, right, having kind of, we've called it everything from like a family engagement, support specialist or an inclusion specialist that again can say like, okay, here's the registration form, but let me actually have an actual conversation with the caregiver of this young person. Tell us about them so that we're not finding out after the fact and responding to a need in the moment. Hopefully it's not a crisis moment, but oftentimes it can be, right? And we're like, oh, or even a situation where a young person shows up with a broken leg, right? And we're like, cool, okay, they're supposed to be on a hiking camp program, right? That's not going to work. But again, like, how do you find out ahead of time and work to build that web of support for the young people in partnership with their caregivers, as opposed to kind of playing telephone, right? We talk about it. There's a colleague of mine who's a researcher who talks about it as the transition of care. And I love that phrase and thinking about how are we transitioning the care of this young person, again, whether it's a young person going from a summer program back to school, coming from their caregivers to an after school program, kind of whatever that transition of care, and how do we ensure both the smooth transition in and out of the program. And so we found, like not only having that registration form, but having those conversations with the caregivers and then asking young people directly, right? So we've also instituted, just as you would do like a physical health check-in, right? As a young person comes, especially for overnight programs, also saying like, hey, like, what worries you? Like, do you feel like you have an adult you can talk to, right? More of a well-being check-in. When we talk about mesh, like mental, emotional, and social health is kind of the framing of it, so that we're really holistically, again, saying, hey, what do you need to feel safe here? One of the things we learned out of that I think was a surprise to many of us, and this was, certainly coming out of COVID, is that food was a huge source of anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
Everything from, hey, I've been home with my family through the COVID years. Like, how do I know what to pick to eat and how much to eat on my own when it's not a caregiver putting food directly in front of me? Or how do I know it's prepared in sanitary conditions? There were a lot of stressors around food that we just simply were not aware of. But once the young people named that, again, I think another example of youth voice, we could proactively say, hey, like, it's actually really important that we give all of the campers coming into the program a tour of the kitchen and a chance to build relationships with the kitchen staff.
Very nice. You just said something that made me think about COVID was definitely such a rough time for a lot of young people to go from being socially engaged. They may complain about school, but it's where they went, and they engaged with people and did different things. And when they got pulled away from that and weren't able to socialize, the amount of anxiety that I saw rise was just, it was a lot of it. But I'm thinking about, I'm pretty sure obviously campfire couldn't exist during those times, but I feel like when you resumed, that was probably such a really good tool and space for young people to try to get reacclimated. Because the mesh piece you said, the mental, emotional, social help. Again, you guys are brilliant. You come up with coining all these terms. I love it.
I wish we could claim it. It's not our own, but yeah.
No, but I mean, but the thing is,
good people to surround ourselves with.
It makes sense because that's legitimately, to me, that personifies exactly what most young people were struggling with when they couldn't be in school. And then you thought them returning to school was going to solve the problem. And it actually didn't. It actually created some anxiety and more for other individuals. I feel like if someone was attending, campfire when it was able to resume over the summer, that seems like that would have been such a good way to kind of reacclimate and adjust yourself to social settings and people and finding, that piece. Because a lot of kids struggle with making friends. And if you were that bridge, like let's say from 8th grade going into 9th grade, but you missed all that time, that's where a lot of, I noticed, of the kids I worked with, or even talking with parents, their kids were struggling.
Absolutely. And I think, we saw a few things to what you're naming, which is, one, yes, we had to find new and creative ways to connect with young people, during the time, right, when so much of their lives and their world was shut down. And, again, we were able to step in where schools weren't able to. And maybe it was, if they had, parents who were first responders that couldn't be home with them during the day. Campfires were able to offer, safe programming for young people to come and do their Zoom schools, right? Or, to be, again, still have some face-to-face and real life interaction with other folks, as summer camps were able to safely open up again. It was a major source of reentry, both for young people, but also for our younger staff as well. Again, who many of them, finished out their high school years virtually, right? And missed, a number of those kind of key, what we would kind of say is key high school experiences, whether it was, the jobs, the volunteer opportunities, the leadership opportunities, the social activities, right, that come with, junior and senior year of high school, and really shifted how we needed to support young people. I think their needs changed a lot during that time. And, while we're a legacy organization, I think one of the things that I take a lot of pride in about Campfire is we're always eager and willing to make adjustments to best support the needs of young people in that moment. And so what our programs were needing and offering, pre-2020 looks different than what they do today. And that's a good thing, right? Because that means we are making the adjustments that young people need in real time.
Wonderful. Well, I've learned a lot, and I'm sure so many people are like, never knew this existed. If there's not one by me, I want to figure out a way to bring it in, because these type of spaces really need to exist. We need more of them for our young people, because they do have a lot of challenges. Like you said, it's a different world than when I was a kid growing up, and even probably when you were a kid. They just have more challenges. And I think sometimes it's easy to think that they're okay, and a lot of times they're not, and they won't tell you. And I think this is a fantastic space for kids to be seen and heard, but also to grow and to thrive. It's fantastic. So thank you so much for carving out time, Shawna, on your Saturday to drop in and talk with my listeners. Of course, I'm going to make sure, like, hey, get to that website, look into it. If you're looking for a volunteer opportunity, hey, even if you don't have kids, you may know a kid who can benefit from this. So it's all about, like, sharing the information. But thank you for taking time out of your Saturday to talk with me and my listeners. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. No, I really enjoyed being here. Thank you.
And of course, everybody, as you know, I shared the information about you can get social with Campfire. So I want to say one of the best ways to figure out things and to get informed, well, is to get social. That's part of our existence now, right? So you can always find Campfire on YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook at Campfire NHQ, and TikTok at Campfire Youth.org. So that's a way to follow what they're doing, to get involved. Of course, probably one of the easiest things to do is probably just to jump on their website, because then you can learn all things that is Campfire, and go from there. And I want to say, when I was looking at the site, that there was everything from being able to donate right there on the site, which is nice. You can learn more about, I would say, each of the programs. So if it's the school year program, you can find out more about that. Like, if the STEM program we talked about got you excited, there's creative arts, you can check it out. Health and well-being, you can learn more about the programs. If you've got that team that you feel like, hey, they could use a little challenge to step up and kind of develop those leadership skills, well, guess what? There's team services and leadership right there at Campfire. So there's that program. And of course, they talk about the wonderful camp and outdoor education piece, which I would agree, connecting with the outdoors is great for everyone, even the adults. I always tell people, going out for a walk daily can be really good for your mental health, just getting some fresh air and some sunshine. So, immersing your kids in that environment can be a fantastic thing to help them grow. So I would say the best and easiest way to learn more about Campfire would be to go to their website and to learn more about them that way too. And of course, donate, and you can figure out if you want to do a partnership. Maybe you have a corporation that you say, I think who I work for would love to partner with Campfire. or sponsor one of their programs, whatever it is. It seems like there's a space for everybody to get involved from what I just heard today from Shawna. So there's no reason why you can't get involved with Campfire. Even if you don't have kids, you can still be impactful in some young person's life, because that's what Campfire is all about. All right, everyone. As always, thank you for tuning in. I always appreciate the support when people listen. This episode's whole purpose was to help you to identify the ambition and harness motivation. So you might say, something, I've always wanted to work with youth. Well, wait, here's a program that's already set up that maybe I can be part of, and I can actualize that thing that I'm inspired to do. So here, if you want to work with kids, here's a fantastic way you can do it. So remember, if you missed any of this episode, you can find all my episodes on iTunes, Apple Podcasts. You can find it on Spotify, iHeartRadio, Amazon Audibles, all those places. Just search M.A.Y.A, My Ambition, Your Ambition. You can always listen to episodes also on my website, which is maya-speaks.com. I always say, go there, check out my blogs that I have, my inspirational blog that I post on Wednesdays about something for you to think and process that can help you to grow and to move into those spaces where you feel safe and you're happy. That's what those daily inspirational things I want you to reflect on. And of course, there's my Me on Pause blog, my play on menopause, which gives you some good information as well about probably being in perimenopause or menopause that you've never considered, because most of the time, no one's ever, menopause, what they tell us, oh yeah, you're going through the change. It's no big deal. Well, that change is a big deal, by the way, people. It's highly disruptive, more so than most people realize. So my blog helps to illuminate those things for you. So go ahead and check those things out. Of course, get social with Maya. You can find me on Facebook, Instagram, and X at Maya Speaks to You. And of course, that's also my YouTube channel, so you can subscribe and share that as well. So everyone, until next time, I remember, this is not my quote. I stole it from Pearl Jam because it's like one of my favorite songs by them. Remember, Seattle, look at that. A little correlation that I just kind of popped in my head. So remember, your present becomes your past and your future is no more. So make sure to make the most of every day. Everyone, be well, stay safe. And as always, each and every one of you is absolutely amazing. I will see you in 2 weeks, because we won't be here next week for episode 76. Everyone, enjoy the rest of your weekend.
Whether you're on the go or listening on your cell phone, tablet, or laptop, you can find the show in the iTunes, Google, and iHeartRadio platforms.
With all due respect, I believe this is going to be our finest hour.
Just search Maya, My Ambition, Your Ambition, and get ready to be inspired and motivated to harness your ambition.